Over to you. I hope it
Okay.
is all right if we record the session.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. I will begin. And first of all, I want to thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be with you. And I would like to share some of the ideas of management of innovation. And I will try to do it in the next, let's say, about an hour or so. If you have any questions, I leave time for questions afterwards, but if you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask me during my presentation. Usually I give a talk more than a presentation, so it's okay to ask in the middle of my presentation any questions that you feel like asking. It's usually better than asking in the end of the presentation. This is one thing. The other thing I've heard what my brief bio that you read, I just want to mention again that you are all most welcome if you come to Israel. We are a new branch of the Chinese University, UIB, here in Israel, and I'm the provost of the university, and hopefully in the future we'll have some cooperation between our two institutions. So I'll be glad if you come to Israel. If I can, we'll come to you so we can meet face to face. I know I'll talk about it in a minute, that we are in a different world now, but still face to face is important. Okay, so I will begin my presentation. Again, any question, anything that you want to ask, you can just stop me and say, ask, any remarks you have, anything that you think about, most welcome to do it. I will begin with the fact that we are in a new world completely. I guess you know that the world is changing in front of our eyes. And we thought that the corona will change it. And now we have a war in Europe, and that changed the world again. So I think for all the young people, I don't know how many young and a little bit older people are at the audience, but I'm sure that for the young people, it's a real change from what we were will be talking if we were had this talk about 3 years ago. The corona changed one thing, the war is changing another thing. And all of it has to focus on many different aspects of our life. We'll focus on the business part of that, but it will be of influence on all our lives. So what are the changes? First of all, between you and me, I'm jumping to this one. Look at this slide. This slide I use every now and then in my talks. This slide is actually saying the world is changing, but we are staying the same. And basically, you know, if we talk about the war in Europe, so I think that most of us were thinking that it will never happen again in the 21st century, in 2022, and it did happen in the previous millennium and with the World War II, and we all thought it's not going to come again. And here we are in something very similar to what we thought will never happen again. With all the treaties in the world, with all the understanding of you know, of the cost of war, the cost of killing each other and so forth. And suddenly out of the blue, something like that happens. Why do I mention it? First of all, I think that every talk that we do, and I'm coming from the human resources side, and nowadays should mention what's going on in terms of people in the world. But other than that is to stress again, and I will stress it along my talk, that at the end of the day, when we're dealing in companies, in organizations with people, people are people are people. They have computers, they have iPhones, They have everything, Meta and Facebook and TikTok and everything. But at the end of the day, there are people, and the way they behaved in the beginning of the earth and the way they behave today is the general behavior is the same thing. I use it when I mention some theory, but that's something that I think the war has made it very clear. The way that we thought that, you know, the stronger you get, the more passionate you get, and you can solve things with talks and with treaties. Putin has showed us that at the end of the day, if you feel you're strong enough, you use your power the way you like to do it. This is one thing. The other thing, of course, is the coronavirus. The coronavirus have showed us things that we thought will never happen. For example, this kind of a talk would never have been materialized 3 years ago, or hardly materialized. We probably were looking for days that I could come to India and talk in front of you. That means that it would cost much more money. It means that it won't be on your schedule when it's more convenient for you. It means that you will see me, but it will entail more and more problems in making it happen. As opposed to this talk, for example, that I was asked to talk on, usually I think on Monday, and then I said I can't Monday. They said no problem, let's do it Tuesday, because we're still on the Zoom. We can do it like that. Tell you the truth, I feel a little bit awkward because I can hardly see you. And usually when I give a talk, I stop and ask some questions, and I tend to try to see who are the people in front of me and everything. Here it's a little bit vague for me, but other than that, it's very easy. I guess most of you were, or some of you were working before the coronavirus, and when it started, the idea was that the world of work will stop until people will be able to go again to the office. What we saw is that within half a year, people are reluctant to go to the offices at all. There are a lot of big and small companies that are saying, well, you can work from home. And we'll talk about it later, what it entails into working from home. But there's no problem. There are some research results that show that even people work better from home. They produce better at home. And people are like, don't want to go and work from the office. More than that, because we have a shortage of supplies today, and we are heading a very, if I can say so, we are heading a very grave economic problem in the world in the next 2 or 3 years. So people will have less cars. If people will have less cars, they would, because you can't produce cars today. You know that production in China of cars is stopping, and in other places of the world, because there's no enough material to produce cars. So people now have an opportunity. You don't have a car, you can't go to work, you can work from home. Academia. I was, as was mentioned, I was the Dean School of Management and the Dean School of Banking in Netanya Academic College for the last 8 years. I just resigned because I have opened this university, this branch in Israel. And my professor said, we can't teach over the Zoom. It's not going to be very effective. And suddenly, after a year with the Zoom, they say, wow, it's effective and it's more convenient. You know, Israel is a country that have about, let's say, something around 9 million people, very poor public transportation. So in the last year, when we are not having the corona lockdown, you can't move in the streets, in the roads. A road can take you a distance of, let's say, 20 kilometers at rush hour, which is usually between 4 and 9 in the evening and 8 to 11 in the morning, can take you, instead of, let's say, 20 minutes, can take you 2 hours. So now it's easy. You don't have to commute to the workplace or to the campuses. You can talk and you can do it over the Zoom, and people can meet each other over the Zoom, and there is a meeting rooms and everything and so forth. So we are having a grave change of the workplace. But on the same token, looking at 2022, we know that we are in the Western world in the era of great resignation. Great resignation. There have never been in the history, in the modern history of industry, that so many people have resigned from the workplace, and not in order to find another place to work, but just resigned. In America, in the United States, you know that in November, it was a month that people resigned. The number of people resigned from their work was the biggest ever. And in Israel, the same thing, people resign and they don't want, and they're not looking for another job or what we call regular job. They are working from home, they are working partly, they don't want to go to the workplace. We'll talk about it in a minute, but this is one thing. The other thing that happens in the last few months is shadowing. People who are actually not coming either to the interview that they are being asked to find a job, or even they sign a contract, but they just don't show up to the work because they don't really want to go back to work. Now we have to ask, we're talking about the Western world, by the way. I must tell you, we are talking about the Western world. We are not talking about Africa, and we're not talking about other countries that are not either developed or developing countries, but there's many, many countries like that. You probably all know that in Norwegian and Sweden, they are turning into 4 days of work instead of 5 days of work. I'm old, so I'm still from the generation that used to work 6 days a week, not 5 days a week. And now we are moving from 6 days a week to 4 days a week. It's all changing the whole idea of work, the whole idea of the workplace, and what people are doing or not doing in the workplace. So this is generally just an opening for that you have to keep in mind for the changes that are occurring in the new world of work. And the new world of work is not in the last 5 years, it's in the last 5 months. So, you know, generation now is not 25 years, it's about 10 years. So new world of work is not about 5 years, it's about 5 months. That's what's going on. Now let's talk about a little bit about innovation. So, you know, the main thing, let me say another thing. Israel is considered to be a startup nation. Startup nation because Israel is known as a country that are the biggest developing of ideas in terms of industry, in terms of medicine, in terms of electronics, technology, sure, war equipment and so forth. It's almost first in the world. Now, we'll talk in a minute why it happened in Israel, but at the same token, we have to remember that it means something for the nation, for the behavior in the nation, and for the future. So the main thing that people know in Israel from the last, let's say 40 years, that if you don't build your dream, someone will hire you to help build theirs. So we are being brought up in Israel on the fact that you have to do your dream, because if you don't do it yourself, somebody will do his dream and you will just assist him. And people like to dream. And people like to think, look at the place and see how you can do it differently than what we do in the day-to-day. This is why we are being called a startup nation. Now, Israel has 9 million population. You know, the numbers are more or less. GNP per capita is 43,660 for 2020. Around unemployment rate is 2.5 to 3%. Urban population is 92%. And we have the highest education rate of our population in the world. People studying. We have in our small country, and you can see the country is very small. I mean, you know, India, just one country in India is bigger than Israel. But people, we have 64 higher education institutions, universities and colleges, and people like to study. This is basically in the system or in the belief of the Judaism that from the inception and from the beginning are always said, people can take everything away from you, but they can't take what you have in your head. So go and study. And sorely enough, you know, we are the Jews, we all experienced it in the Second World War. You know, the Jews in Europe were very rich, most of them. They had houses, they had money, and in, you know, in one decision of Nazi Germany, they lost their houses, they lost their money, they lost their factories and everything. And actually they were transferred to death. And the only people who didn't die in the Nazi machine were people that the Nazis, basically, there were people also who were resisting it and so forth, and the Nazi didn't catch them. But from the people that were survived the Nazi regime and were captured by the Nazi regime, the only ones that survived were Jews who were able to do something that the Nazi needed. There were some musicians, there were some people who knew how to build something, how to repair things, which means at the end of the day, the people who were saved out of the 6 million that the Nazi killed were people who had studied something, had some profession that can help them, although they came from a very rich families. So the Jewish tradition tells you, you have to study. And being a professor at the academia and you are studying in the academia, my belief, my knowledge, and that's why I am in the academia, I'm also in the market, but in the academia for the last 40 years, is if you really want to succeed, you have to study. You can't succeed if you don't study. So if we were face to face, you probably could give me some you know, examples of people who have never studied and were very successful. Yes, there are some people like that, but the majority of people are people who have studied. If they don't study, usually you can't be very successful, because studying at the university gives you the basic and the thing that you can always go back to if you have to renew something, if you have to redevelop yourself, and if you really want to create something. And this is one of the explanations why Israel is a startup nation. The other thing that makes Israel as innovative country is, I'm trying to find the right one for that, is, so I talked about education and infrastructure, circumstances and political surrounding. So just for you, probably, I guess, whoever looked at Israel, to know, until 5 or 7 years ago, we didn't have any natural resources. We were a small country that was still is actually surrounded with enemies, that the line of transportation used to be, until 2-3 years ago, very, very long, because we couldn't cross over any Arab country. We didn't have natural resources. And the only thing, and we have very little land, and the only thing that we had is our ideas, our ability to create something that the world wants to buy. In terms of innovation, in terms of knowledge, you know that Waze is Israeli innovation. You know that in medicine, there are a lot of innovation, because since we were born, we are being told the only thing that can make Israel survive is ideas, innovation. We don't have water, we don't have natural resources, we have enemies around us. The only thing that we have is what we have in our heads. So that's the other thing that made Israel an innovative country. That is a very interesting, by the way, thing, because in the last 5 to 7 years, Israel has a lot of gas and oil. Actually, I don't know if you follow the news, but in the news, it was said yesterday that our prime minister told Europe, actually not the prime minister, because we are trying to be in between Ukraine and Russia, but some people in the government said that if, you know, the problem with the war in Europe now is worldwide war is, of course, the fact that they are the biggest producer of grain and food in Europe. The other thing is that Russia gives oil and gas to Europe to heat and to cool countries, and Europe is very dependent on the Russian oil and gas. Now, since the Western countries pulled a lot of sanctions on Russia, so Israel said, actually, one of the people in the government says that Israel can sell, I don't know how they're going to do it, but anyway, gas and oil to Europe, because we have a lot of gas and oil that were found about 10 years ago on our territorial water around our country, and we are having a lot of gas and oil. So actually, we are becoming a country that, if it was managed well, we can really rely on gas and oil for our production of gas and oil in terms of money that we can use. So this thing, by the way, is a very interesting question if, and only if, Israel will have a lot of money coming from gas and oil, which we don't have at this point, because the agreement with the world, big companies of the world who were finding this, makes Israel not getting enough money out of the whole thing, although it's in our territorial water. What happens to Israel as an innovative country when people would have enough money from gas and oil? We saw the Emirates, we saw Saudi Arabia and everything. What happens to countries like that who have enough money out of their natural resources? But this we don't know. Whoever wants to do a PhD on what happens to people when the country has enough money and they don't have to worry too much and work too hard, that's a very interesting question. The other thing that made Israel a successful story is the government policy. The government policy in the last 40 years have put quite a bit of money on innovation, on backing startups and small industries, giving them money by the chief scientist of the country for them to try and innovate new things in terms of technology, medicine, and so forth. So this is a government that was also always backing this kind of behavior. And the other thing is a cultural aspect that I would say in a minute, which means what is our culture that really makes people being innovative. And then we'll move into, I'll stop for a minute if there are any questions, but we'll move into management of innovation. And the cultural aspect that Israel has is that the young generation of Israel, not only today, but also in the past, rules were made to be broken. Managers are made to be asked if they tell you to do something, why they think I should do what I'm being told. And discipline is not one of our stronger suits. So when you look at that, and we'll talk about it in a minute, we can explain on the one hand, the problem of how can you lead people like that, but on the other hand, explains why people can innovate all the time. I'm stopping for a minute to see if there are any questions before I move into management of innovation and talk a little bit about it. Are there any questions, anything that you want to say? I guess if I don't hear anything, any questions? Anything that you want to say?
I think you can continue, Professor Ravid.
Okay.
Address questions at the end. Once you're done.
Okay, so I will continue. Okay, so let's talk about management of innovation. Because it's not enough that you have people who have good ideas. It's not enough that you have people who are ready to think differently. The question is how to manage the whole thing. And I guess you all know about this. Usually when we talk with people, 30% of the truth is that 30% they tell us and 70% is what they don't tell us. And in order to manage innovation, you have to work about this 70% and not about this 30%. In an example, when you are a manager and you talk to your employee who leaves you, and a lot of people are changing, their places of work nowadays, you have to remember that what the employee tells you is the 30% that he's sure that everybody can see. What really made him leave your company is here. And this is difficult to find out, which means when he tells you, I moved to another company because they paid me more, which makes sense, of course, because if I'm working and I can get for the same work that I'm doing a little more money, and sometimes in the high tech, it's about 10 to 15% more of 20 or 25% more than I'm being paid now. So it makes sense that I'm leaving, but the truth is that I'm not leaving because of the money. I'm leaving because other things happening. For example, people were not listening to me. I felt that they don't appreciate me. And this is here, but I'm not telling it because, first of all, I don't want to fight with my previous employer. Secondly, why should I tell him this? And when I can easily get out with the fact that I'm earning 25% more, and he would probably tell me, I can't pay you 25% more. So if you need to leave, you have to leave. Now, when you want to manage people generally and manage innovation, you have to talk about this 70%. Why do you have to talk about this 70%? Because we are living, I guess also this one, the 21st century is VUCA, Violet, uncertainty, complex, and ambiguity, which means, I'm trying to make it quicker, which means we are living in an uncertain world. We don't know what's going to be tomorrow. We don't know what we need in the organization. All the older people around you there, they knew what the old, in the old world, we knew that things will change, but will change every 5 years, every 10 years. Nowadays, as I began my talk, things can change so quickly, and I don't understand why. And the environment is within the organization. If somebody wants to innovate something in Israel, he has to do it very quickly, because if he doesn't do it very quickly, somebody else would take his idea and do it quicker. So we are living in a very, very changing, ever-changing world, that the problem is not only that it changes, but it changes very quickly and very dynamically. Now let's talk about change a little bit. I'm using now some theory, by the way, because still we are in the academia. So there is a model of change, and we know that people basically don't like change. Most of people, it doesn't matter if they tell you that they like change, usually they don't like change. They like to know where they're going, they like to know what they're doing tomorrow. For example, take your schooling. What happens if I would be the director of your college, and I would say, you're coming to study management, you have to be in classes from 8 to 6, but I would decide without telling you before what kind of classes we'll have and what the discussion will be, and you don't have anything you have no previous knowledge. Most of the students that I know would say, no, I need to know in the front what is the course, what is going to be talked about it. We are always telling people the known. We are trying to make people know in advance what they are doing and where they are going, and mainly because there is a fear from the unknown. And there is a comfort zone. We like to be in our comfort zone. Comfort zone is built on the fact that I know what's going to happen. And every change makes us feel that you will losing something. And if you want to do innovation, you have to be in the area of the unknown. If you are in the area of the known, you don't innovate. You look to the past, you don't look to the future. Innovation is usually something that people usually tell you it's not going to happen. That's not, if it was such a good idea, somebody else would have done it before you. If it's such good idea, why nobody thought about it before? You know, when we were, me and my partner were deciding to open the university, UIBE, a branch here in Israel, because we know that we have a good idea. We want to familiarize Israelis to the Eastern world and people from around the world on the combination between West and East. So we are actually the bridge between East and West. Everybody told us that we talked about that idea 6 years ago. Everyone told us, no, it's not going to happen. Come on, the Chinese would not like you to open it. The Israelis would not let you. It's not a good idea. If it was such a good idea, somebody else would have been doing it before, and so forth. So in order to be innovative, you have to move away from your comfort zone. And you have to be somebody who has an internal locus of control, which means you believe in yourself more than you believe in what other people tell you. You have to be goal-oriented, and you have to be flexible, which means that you are believing in yourself enough to try a new thing. And this is something, as I explained before, that Israelis by culture and by nature are being brought up with this idea. I would skip this one and I would go into management. Now, I don't know if you know this theory of a guy named Adidjas. And he said that in order to manage well, you have to have people together, making decisions together, but different people that have different thoughts and different ideas. Usually in organizations, we have people who think the same. I don't know how many of you work, but go tomorrow to your workplace and see that when you have a discussion in a group of managers, most of them are thinking the same. Those who are not thinking the same find it very hard to oppose the top management. They find it very hard to oppose top management because top management says something, and if you say, no, it's not a good idea, we could have done it differently, usually that you will be expelled from your organization, or you'll feel that people don't like it. If you had any theories, and I guess you had on group thinking, so you know there is a thing called groupthink, which means if we are in the same group, at the end of the day, we all think the same. Israel, basically, and organizations in Israel are changing the challenge of working together in a group, but letting people to be different, letting people to say that although top management thinks one thing, they think differently. And they think they have a better idea. If you come, and when you come to Israel, and you're most welcome to come to our university for a seminar, you'll see that when you have a class in Israel, you have about 10 minutes of lecture and 45 minutes of people asking questions. But it's not only questions. It's questions that behind the question, there is a bigger question mark. And the bigger question mark is you, professor, talking very nice. I'm not sure you're right. I think you're wrong. And I think that I am right and you're wrong. This is what stands behind the question mark that students have. And that's what stands behind the discussion in the workplace. The employee, the young employee who finished the Technion or finished the university just 2 years ago and is being managed by a manager who is there in the organization for 5 years, who have studied 10 years ago, generally, before he meets his manager, he already thinks that he has better ideas, that he knows better what to do than his manager. Now, so far, it's very interesting to talk about it, but the question is, how do you manage this? And remember, in order to manage innovation, people who are innovators are people who are trying to self-actualize themselves. Yeah, this is called the hierarchy of Maslow. I guess whoever learned the management knows it. We are talking about people who feel that they are at the top of this and not at the bottom. They don't care too much about money. They do care about money, but that's not what motivates them. They don't care about safety. They care, but that's not what motivates them. The motivation aspects start with what's written here, the psychological needs: belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. This is the three things that really move people in innovation. Now, if we were face to face, I would ask, how do you manage a person who thinks that he is better than you, who shows that he knows better than you, but you still have to manage him? You still have to tell him what to do. What do you do with that? How do you manage? So in order not to get to this point, that you are in a group, that somebody is moving to this side, somebody is moving to this side, and you are the manager is trying to balance it, which I would have asked you if I were face to face, what happened in the end of these bicycles? The standstill, they don't move, and you have to move. So how do you manage people who really are here and they want to be there and they are sure that they are and they know better than you? So let me give you 2 or 3 ideas of what we do in some of the companies in Israel that make us, in terms of management, make up a startup nation and makes innovation happen. The one thing is acknowledgement of their knowledge, which means the more successful organizations in Israel are organizations who acknowledge the knowledge of their employees, which means they know and they give them a reward on the fact that they come up with new ideas. This is one thing. The other thing that we are doing it, and I'll give you an example why it happens easily in Israel, is a belonging and love. The Israeli and the Jewish, but the Israeli tradition basically, you know, we meet with families every Friday. Every Friday, you can see families moving from one place to another in order to eat the Shabbat dinner together. In America, and I was living in America, families meet twice a year, once in the New Year and once in Passover. But all the rest, they don't meet. In Israel, every week, families, you know, Israel is small. I give it. Yeah, that's true. But in Israel, every family, almost every family meets every week on Friday. They live in Tel Aviv. Some live in Haifa. It's an hour drive. It's worthwhile to eat together on Friday night if you live an hour apart. If you don't meet your family every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks at least, then probably there a problem with the family. That's how the society looks at it. So we feel belonging to each other and we feel that we are being loved. And in order for high tech, in order for innovation to prosper, you have to give people esteem and love. And this is what we do. And the third thing is that in Israel, for the better and for the worse, if you innovate a small thing, it doesn't matter. Innovation is only big. You have invented something that nobody thought about it. I was teaching a lot about Japan 25 years ago. In Japan, in the history in Japan, that made Japan a greatest country, by the way, they were celebrating innovation even if somebody did a very small thing. In Israel, if you do a very small thing and it's in innovation, people say, well, yeah, it's nice, but it's not changing the world. You have to do something that changes the world. So, you know, the bad thing about it, of course, that a lot of small things are not happening. The good thing about it, that you work towards changing the world. You work towards doing something in medicine that really changes the world. The normal talk about innovation here is not let's do a small thing and step by step, but let's do a big thing, something that completely will change the world. So that's what people need in order to innovate. They need esteem, they need love, and they need the push to do something extraordinary. What the problem that it all entails is management. How do you manage if you have 50 employees that each and every one of them thinks that he knows better than the manager? How do you manage the whole thing? So it's very difficult. It's becoming more and more difficult the more we get global. the more, you know, if we go back to the first one, the more people feel that if they don't get it, they don't need to move to another place. They just don't need to go to work at all. This is a big resignation, and there is a shortage of people in Israel in the high tech, and by the way, the low tech also, because people don't really want to work, and it's very difficult to manage people who are basically innovative. And after saying all of this, I would like to just to mention that Israel as a startup nation, we are talking about, let's say, around 12 to 14% of the people. The rest of the people are not in this area. They are in a different area, but there is a spillover. So the difficulty in managing this innovation is not only where there is a real innovation, but it's also spilling over to more to other places like universities, education, electricity company, and so forth, because people see how other people behave and they behaving accordingly. You know that when you live in a group, you probably at the end of the day would behave the same thing as the group have behaved. So what do we need in a manager in order to manage? And I will end with that. What do we need in manager in order to manage innovation? We need a leader that can recognize the needs of his follower, and we need him to make them satisfied, which means, I said before, recognize the knowledge, give them enough love and compassion, and engage them in what the aim of the organization. You enable them, you visionize them, you give them values, but at the end of the day, you do it through them and you make them part of the organization in their feelings. They would feel part of the organization, and then you can manage them. If they feel that they are being part of the organization. If you manage them like whoever management, like Henry Ford said, Henry Ford managed people by telling them, I give you money, you give me, you're doing what I'm telling you. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It would not produce happy people. Now, in order to be innovative, you have to be happy. If you are not happy, you don't think other than what you're being told to do. You have to make people happy. In order to do that, you have to make people believe in you. I just read a research done about, I don't know, half a year ago about what happens if you don't believe in the person who is talking to you or the person you live with. There is a change in your mind, a chemical change in your mind, and you quickly look for another way of doing things. So managers of innovation should make their followers believe them when they tell them that they giving them enough space to innovate, and believe them when they tell them, now you have to do what I'm telling you because this is what is required of you. In both of those things, when they believe in you, they would follow you. They believe in you when they feel that you care about them. We go back to the beginning of history. People connect through love and care. We are in the era when we talk about money all the time, but people believe you love and care, and when they feel that they're being loved and somebody care about them, they are relaxed. When they are relaxed, they start thinking differently, they start innovate, they feel enough safety in order safe to do it. And the last thing, I said 10 minutes, we are less than 10 minutes. And the last thing you have to remember, not every, but most of our people go to the army. The army, the basic training of an officer or any commander in the army is make people believe in you. Because in the field, when there is a war, if they don't believe in you, they won't go and risk their lives. And I don't know what you read about the war now in Europe, but what I read about, one of the problems of the Russian army is that the soldiers don't believe in their commanders. They don't believe in the cause of the war, and that's why they don't succeed as was believed not only by Putin but by all the world, that in about 4 or 5 days Ukraine will be conquered completely. And on the other hand, we see the Ukrainians that they believe in the cause and they're trying to defend their country, and they are very successful. So far, I mean, they pay dear prices, but they still hold. And that is how in a startup, if you want, you need people who believe in you, people that know that you care about them, people that understand the cause, and then they will follow you. And that is what needed in management of innovation. Thank you. And I don't know if there are any questions, if it made any sense, whatever.
Thank you so much, Professor Ravid. I think we may not have time to give the students the opportunity to ask you questions, but with your permission, I will share your mail ID if the students have any interaction, anything that they would like to. But it was a wonderful insight. Love, caring, and belief should drive innovation. That is an absolutely delightful perspective, sir. So thank you so much. They have an exam to go to.
Oh, good luck.
I will release them without further delay.
Okay.
And once more, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for this lovely introduction to how innovation can be driven in this new world with love, caring, and belief. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you all. Good luck in your exam, and I hope we can meet face to face.
Yes, we will. We will organize something. I think now that COVID is practically behind us, I think we look forward to a visit from you in person to talk to us.
Great.
Right? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely connecting.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.